Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, some disappointing but not all that surprising news, I don't think, coming out Friday morning. Four-star quarterback Brady Hart flipping his commitment from Michigan to Texas A&M and reclassifying 2025. And that reclassification piece, it kind of makes sense why Brady Hart's not coming to Michigan. Like, if this kid wanted to reclassify to 2025, it is very hard to do so when you have the number one prospect in the country, Bryce Underwood, committed to Michigan. And I think there's also an element of he had a really strong relationship with Kurt Campbell. And I think the future of Kurt Campbell with this Michigan program is also kind of murky, and there's some question marks about it. So, yes, Brady Hart's a very good quarterback. I'm a really big fan of, and it stings to see him decommit and go to Texas A&M, but I do think it makes sense. But though, more importantly, it kind of gets into a talking point that we've had over the last couple of days and weeks, and that is, how do you manage the quarterback room around Bryce Underwood? I want to get into kind of two different conversations. One, how do you go about building the future of the quarterback room with Bryce Underwood in that 2025 class? And then I want to talk about what the quarterback room is going to look like immediately in 2025 as well, where there's certainly some conversations to be had. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Michigan fans, especially the Michigan fans who are checking this out, the recruiting trail talking about 2026 quarterback, the diehards, it's going to be a fun next couple of weeks for us Michigan fans on the recruiting trail. Appreciate all the support y'all have shown the boys for the last couple of days since Bryce Underwood has committed. It means the world. We love doing it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, we don't totally agree in terms of how to manage this quarterback room over the next couple of years. So we're going to get into a few different options for Sharon Moore. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. Dill, I'll start here. This is the way I look at it, and I think you do have some disagreements, which I think are fair. You look at recruiting the 2026 class. I think it's inevitably going to be hard. When you're going after an elite quarterback in 2026, guys that want to play early on in their college football career, it's just going to be hard to get them to come to Michigan when you have Bryce Underwood in 2025. It's going to be 2 years before these kids get shots to play for Michigan in this offense if everything kind of works out how we expect it to with Bryce Underwood. Here's my take on it. I'm not saying don't get a quarterback in 2026. The kind of quarterback that I get, I think you kind of know, right, getting a top quarterback, which a lot of them are already committed to other schools, that's going to be hard to do. I think a lot of Michigan fans understand that. I do two things. One, in 2026, maybe you can grab just an intriguing quarterback that needs some time. Like, hey, we like some of the traits, but we know it might be 2 or 3 years before they're ready to play at the college football level. Bring them in and kind of let them develop behind Bryce Underwood for the next couple of years and potentially be the guy when Bryce Underwood is moving on from the program going to the NFL. Here's my take. I would really put all your eggs in the 2027 class. I think you just understand it's going to be hard to get an elite quarterback in 2026 with Bryce. There are a lot of 2027ers. So I don't think there's a single 2027er who's committed to a program right now. If Bryce Underwood comes in and plays some really good football over the next couple of years, it's going to kind of, you said it best, change the paradigm, change the perception of this Michigan program. I think right now, before Bryce Underwood, you kind of looked at Michigan, if you were a quarterback, and said, I don't know if this is the offense I want to go play for. If Bryce Underwood comes in and balls out the next couple of years, that's going to shift. And these 2027 quarterbacks are going to look at the success Bryce Underwood's having and saying, all right, this is a place where I know I'm going to compete for Big Ten championships and national championships. We've seen that, but it's also an offense that I'm going to be able to really make an impact on and put up some big numbers.
See, one thing I look at, when you talk about what's the 2026 quarterback going to be like? I'm not sure Michigan can't really swing in that class too, and not frankly swing in every class. Because you look, when you bring in a talent of the likes of Bryce Underwood, you start to be able to bring in the talent around him at the receiver spot, at the offensive line spot, those spots that, again, the receiver, Michigan hadn't been recruiting that at a super high level. I think if Michigan can, again, that paradigm shift with Bryce Underwood, start bringing in those type of guys, I don't see how you can't necessarily stack classes year after year where you're bringing in when Lincoln Riley had it rolling at Oklahoma, he was bringing in top quarterbacks relatively consistently year after year after year.
But even with teams like Oklahoma, what he was doing at USC too, there was always, kind of that gap. That gap year where, okay, Caleb Williams transferring to USC, we're not going to take one, then we're going to take Malachi Nelson in the 2023 class. to me, I think, look, if there's a quarterback in the 2026 class that's an elite prospect that's having offers from all the Power Four programs across the country, and they want to come to Michigan and they're willing to sit for 2 years behind Bryce Underwood, we ain't saying no, just like we aren't going to say no to Brady Hart. But I think you have to recognize the position you're in and where you want to allocate your resources and time, especially when recruiting quarterbacks. It's hard to recruit 20 different quarterbacks. You want to kind of cradle them, and really start to hone in on one quarterback and show them a lot of attention. I don't know if the time is worth it in 2026 because you kind of know it's going to be hard to get a kid that's elite to come in 2026. And that's a good problem to have. But then in 2027, what you're selling these kids is, hey, Bryce Underwood's playing really, really well. You have the opportunity to come in. You'll be a freshman when Bryce Underwood's in year 3. You can sit and learn from one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And then in year 2, when Bryce Underwood, look, I think Bryce Underwood is going to be a 3-and-done guy. I think that's what we want, right? If he's 3-and-done guy, that means he's doing what we need him to do at Michigan. Then he's coming in year 2 and saying, all right, this is my offense to take over. To me, it makes more sense for Michigan to say, all right, we might know we're not going to get an elite guy in 2026. Maybe we'll take a tradesy guy that needs a couple of years. That's kind of lower on the recruiting rankings. And then we're going to push our eggs in 2027 and grab an elite quarterback there, which I think it will be easier to do if Bryce Underwood comes in and has some real success.
And again, to me, I think it'll just be interesting. It's hard to know now. Like seeing into the future, though, I could see Michigan becoming a much more attractive destination.
Yeah, and I think another.
That's where I get like, do you really need to like wait 2 years to recruit another quarterback?
I'm not saying they're wait, but like that's where we did. Like I think we might be just like talking by each other. So I'm not saying you don't recruit a quarterback in 2026. I'm saying if you have a finite amount of time and resources to recruit one, I don't know if you're spending all your time in the 2026 class. I think you just might be looking more towards 2027 where none of them are committed. Like a lot of top kids in 2026 are already committed to schools, which I'm not saying those always stick. We know we just saw that with Bryce Underwood.
Changed in Michigan, though, so I don't know.
But it's harder to flip commitments than getting guys who are uncommitted. And then kind of push your chips in the 2027 class. That's kind of how I would do it. Another thing is it kind of depends on if Michigan goes on and gets an offensive coordinator. And then it's like, all right, now you get a fresh kind of board and say, hey, how do you want to build this offense? What kind of quarterbacks do you want? The second conversation that I think needs to be had, and I think it's just worth having right now, is what does this quarterback room look like in 2025? They're kind of in that situation Nebraska was in 12 months ago where you're bringing a guy like Dylan Raiola, you're bringing in a guy like Bryce Underwood. Hey, look, I don't know if we'll see that many quarterbacks in the transfer portal that even a year 1 Bryce Underwood is going to start over him. I just think that's just what Bryce Underwood is. I think that's why we went after him as hard as we did. The plan is to start Bryce Underwood in 2025, at least the way I look at it. Now you look at Alex Orji, you look at Davis Warren. Obviously, Jack Tuttle's done with football. What is the quarterback room going to look like? It probably is kind of contingent on Jaden Davis. What does the development look like? Does he look like a guy that could play and kind of be a really effective quarterback in that room in 2025? But you're probably looking to add a quarterback. At the end of the day, it's probably only 2 scholarship quarterbacks you're going in with in 2025. What kind of quarterback are you looking for in the transfer portal?
I mean, it's pretty clear you're not going to get a Cam Ward. I mean, again, he's not going to come in with his last year of eligibility or maybe he has 2 years, whatever it's going to be. And he's the guy who's looking to go into the NFL draft. That just doesn't really feel like in the cards. But again, like Michigan taking Jack Tuttle, I think you'd take a very similar player, a guy who even in his retirement announcement pretty much said he came to Michigan to develop and eventually coach. I think Jack Tuttle was pretty aware that there were probably low probability he was going to have a long NFL career at that point and where he was. But a guy who is certainly a serviceable backup and I think did well with JJ. I think that relationship fit. I think it made sense for both parties. I don't see why they can't really go do that again.
Similar to like Alan Bowman too. That's kind of a similar situation where can you get a veteran quarterback that is okay not starting? So it's going to be hard to get, the top 10 quarterbacks in the transfer portal. They all want to go and start and play. So it's probably going to be hard to get that kind of quarterback. And quite frankly, I don't think Michigan should spend their time and resources going after that kind of guy. Most of Michigan's time and resources in the transfer portal should be building some Mercedes-Benz around Bryce Underwood. Creating an offense where he can immediately come in and have success. That's where you should be spending most of your resources and time, not going after a quarterback that might be his backup or coming for competition. I think you're trying to set Bryce Underwood up for immediate success.
But that's
So
where I think like a wily veteran, kind of not
yeah,
super talented, but a guy who maybe has played at a school like Ohio or wherever else they
you
might have
want
played, like that's the type of guy I'd be looking at.
you want two boxes that they check. One, they're veterans; they've been around the block. So you have a true freshman, Bryce Underwood, who can kind of learn from a pro's pro, so to speak, who's been in the college football landscape. And then two, you probably want serviceable backup play. Like you can't just get a guy that can't play, because if you want some depth at quarterback, just like any other position.
Well, and the
If
mentality needs to be like they need to get it. Like it can't be like a
yeah,
Cade McNamara, who I don't think was totally aware of what his role was in
well,
the Michigan quarterback room by the end of the year, because it was a hostile relationship with him and JJ. He didn't want to work with him. He didn't want to deal with him. Like
yes.
you certainly don't want that, I wouldn't think.
Yes, I would agree, but you almost want a JJ Cade situation when JJ was a freshman, where it's like a solid backup that I think we all think JJ probably should have played a little bit earlier in that 2021 year anyways, but that's not worth going down. But a guy that can come in and play some solid football for you, but most importantly can be that veteran
But
body.
you want him
And
to
what's
be comfortable with the opportunity potential that they're going to be the backup. That is kind of the
Well, no,
issue.
they definitely need to be comfortable with that, because it's probably what you're getting. And there will be quarterbacks like that. I think Jack Tuttle came in. He didn't think he was going to unseat JJ McCarthy when JJ was going into year 3, but he's like, hey, I can give some depth and I can be a veteran presence in that room. Because you look at what that quarterback room might look like, there's a very good shot. It just looks like Jaden Davis and Bryce Underwood. And we'll see if Jaden Davis decides to hit the portal. That's a young quarterback room. You want to inject a guy who's a redshirt senior, one of those 6-year guys that's been around the block. That's kind of where we're going for. Again, kind of wrap up the conversation. It's disappointing that Brady Hart transferred out. I think we kind of knew this one would be a tough one to have stick. There's a couple of different avenues where Michigan can go to build this quarterback room around Bryce over the next couple of years. We'll sign out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. To the Michigan fans, it's going to heat up over the next couple of weeks. So appreciate you guys rocking with it, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.